The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the general store in Utica, Montana Territory, and Wilhelmina Foster pressed herself against the worn leather seat, her hands trembling so violently she had to clasp them together to keep the driver from noticing. It was August of 1881, and she had traveled nearly 2,000 miles to marry a man she had never met, fleeing horrors she could never speak of, only to arrive and discover that her intended husband had died 3 weeks prior from a riding accident that broke his neck. The driver, a weathered man with kind eyes, opened the door and extended his hand to help her down. Wilhelmina flinched backward, her breath catching in her throat, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The driver's face softened with understanding, and he lowered his hand, stepping back to give her space. "Take your time, miss," he said gently. "Ain't nobody rushing you." She forced herself to breathe, to move, to step down from the coach without assistance. Her legs felt like water beneath her long, gray traveling dress, and the August heat wrapped around her like a suffocating blanket. The main street of Utica stretched before her, dusty and lined with wooden buildings that seemed to shimmer in the afternoon sun. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer warmth. A woman emerged from the general store, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 40, with auburn hair streaked with gray and a face that spoke of both hardship and kindness. "You must be Wilhelmina Foster," the woman said, keeping a respectful distance. "I'm Martha Green. My husband owns the store. We received word you were coming, and we also received the terrible news about Harold Zimmerman. I'm so very sorry." Wilhelmina nodded, unable to form words. Her throat felt tight, and the familiar panic was rising in her chest. She had nowhere to go, no money to return east, and no home to return to even if she did. "We have a room above the store," Martha continued, her voice calm and measured. "It's small, but it's clean and private. You're welcome to stay there while you figure out what you'd like to do. There's no charge and no expectations. You just arrived and you've had a shock." The kindness in Martha's voice made Wilhelmina's eyes sting with tears. She managed a whispered, "Thank you." Martha nodded and gestured toward a side door. "I'll have my daughter bring your trunk up. You won't be disturbed. There's water for washing, and I'll bring you some supper later." Wilhelmina climbed the narrow stairs to the small room, grateful that Martha didn't follow, didn't try to make conversation, didn't ask questions. The room was indeed small, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that looked out over the main street. She sank onto the bed and allowed herself to cry silently, shoulders shaking, tears streaming down her face. She had thought Montana would be her salvation. That marriage to a stranger would at least provide safety and distance from the nightmares of Boston. Her stepfather's cruelty had driven her mother to an early grave 2 years ago, and Wilhelmina had endured his presence alone after that, trapped in that house, until she finally found the courage to answer Harold Zimmerman's advertisement for a mail-order bride. Now Harold was dead, and she was stranded in a territory she didn't know, surrounded by strangers. The sun was setting when Martha knocked softly and left a tray outside the door. Wilhelmina waited until she heard footsteps retreating before opening the door and bringing the food inside. Stew, bread, and apple pie. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, and then lay down fully clothed on the bed, staring at the ceiling until exhaustion finally pulled her into fitful sleep. The next morning, Wilhelmina woke to the sounds of the town coming to life. Wagons rattled past, voices called greetings, horses whinnied. She washed her face in the basin and changed into a simple blue calico dress, braiding her dark blonde hair and pinning it up. She couldn't hide in this room forever, though every fiber of her being wanted to do exactly that. When she finally descended the stairs, Martha was behind the counter of the general store serving a customer. The store was empty except for them, and Martha smiled when she saw Wilhelmina. "Good morning. Did you sleep at all?" "Some," Wilhelmina admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's coffee and biscuits in the back room if you're hungry. Help yourself to anything you need." Wilhelmina hesitated, then forced herself to ask, "Is there work I could do to earn my keep?" Martha studied her for a moment. "Can you read and write, do figures?" "Yes, madam. My mother was a teacher before she married." "Well, I could use help with the bookkeeping and inventory. My eyes aren't what they used to be, and my daughter has her hands full with her own children. If you're willing, we can work out an arrangement." Relief flooded through Wilhelmina. Work meant purpose, meant she could stay, meant she wouldn't have to figure out what came next just yet. "I'm willing, thank you." Over the following days, Wilhelmina settled into a routine. She worked in the store, keeping to the back room as much as possible, emerging only when Martha needed her to fetch something from the shelves. She spoke little, kept her eyes down, and flinched whenever a male customer entered the store. Martha never commented on this, never pushed, simply worked around Wilhelmina's obvious fear with patient understanding. It was nearly 2 weeks after her arrival when Wyatt Lawson first walked into the store. Wilhelmina was at the counter, taking inventory of the tinned goods when the door opened. She glanced up automatically and found herself looking at a tall man in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin, dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and eyes the color of a summer sky. He stopped just inside the door, his hat in his hands, and something in his expression made her freeze. He saw her fear. She knew he did because he immediately stepped back, giving her more space, his movements slow and deliberate. "Morning, madam," he said quietly, his voice a low rumble that somehow didn't frighten her as much as it should have. "I'm here to pick up an order for the ranch." "Name's Wyatt Lawson." Wilhelmina's hands shook as she checked the list Martha had left. "The Lawson Ranch order," she managed, her voice barely audible. "It's in the back." "I can wait," Wyatt said, not moving from his spot near the door. "No rush." She hurried to the back room, her heart pounding. Martha was there, sorting through crates. "There's a man here for the Lawson Ranch order," Wilhelmina said, hating the tremor in her voice. Martha looked up and smiled. "Ah, that'll be Wyatt. He's a good man, owns a ranch about 5 miles north of town. Lost his parents to fever 4 years back and has been running the place on his own since. Never any trouble from him." She stood and brushed off her skirts. "I'll take care of it." But when they returned to the front, Wyatt was still standing by the door, hat in hand, looking at nothing in particular. Martha started gathering his order, and Wilhelmina retreated to her inventory work, acutely aware of his presence. "How's the herd doing, Wyatt?" Martha asked as she piled supplies on the counter. "Good. Lost a calf to a cougar last week, but overall can't complain. The new bull's working out well." "That's fine to hear. And how are you managing out there all alone? You really should think about hiring some help." "I've been considering it," Wyatt said. His voice was steady, calm, never rising above a conversational tone. "But it's hard to find good men who want to work that far from town. Well, if you ever need anything, you let us know. Appreciate that, Mrs. Green." Wilhelmina kept her head down, but she could feel his gaze drift toward her occasionally. Not staring, not invasive, just aware. When Martha finished tallying his order, Wyatt paid and began loading supplies into a crate to carry to his wagon. He made 2 trips, always slow and deliberate in his movements, never coming too close to where Wilhelmina stood. Before he left, he turned back at the door. "Nice to meet you, madam," he said to Wilhelmina, his tone respectful and kind. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. "That's one of the good ones," Martha said quietly. "His father raised him right before he passed. Treats everyone with respect, helps his neighbors, pays his debts. This territory could use more men like Wyatt Lawson." Wilhelmina didn't respond, but something about the encounter stayed with her. He had been afraid of frightening her. She had seen it in the way he held himself back, in the careful distance he maintained. It was such a foreign concept that she didn't quite know what to make of it. Wyatt came to town every 2 weeks for supplies, and each time, the pattern repeated. He would enter the store, greet Martha and Wilhelmina politely, keep his distance, conduct his business, and leave. He never pushed for conversation, never tried to approach Wilhelmina, never did anything that might make her uncomfortable. After the third visit, Wilhelmina found herself less tense when he arrived, though she still couldn't bring herself to do more than whisper a greeting in return. September arrived with cooler temperatures and the first hints of autumn color in the aspens on the mountainsides. Wilhelmina had been in Utica for nearly a month, and while she still struggled with fear, the constant panic had eased somewhat. The town was small enough that she had learned who the troublemakers were and could avoid them, and most of the residents had grown accustomed to her quiet presence and respected her need for space. One afternoon, while Wilhelmina was sweeping the front porch of the store, a commotion down the street caught her attention. 3 men on horseback were riding through town, whooping and firing pistols into the air. She dropped the broom and fled inside, her heart racing, memories flooding back of violence and fear and pain. Martha found her huddled in the back room, shaking uncontrollably. "It's all right," Martha said softly, kneeling beside her but not touching her. "They're just cowboys from the Morrison spread, blowing off steam on payday. They'll ride through, make noise, drink too much at the saloon and sleep it off. They're fools, but they're harmless fools. Sheriff Taylor will make sure they don't cause real trouble." Wilhelmina nodded, trying to control her breathing, trying to force the memories back into the locked box in her mind where she kept them. "Did someone hurt you badly, child?" Martha asked gently. "Back east," Wilhelmina's throat constricted. She managed a single nod. "I thought so. I've seen that kind of fear before. My sister had it after her first husband died. He was a cruel man and it took her years to heal." Martha stood slowly. "Take your time. Come out when you're ready. There's no judgment here." It was nearly an hour before Wilhelmina felt steady enough to return to work. The cowboys had moved on, the street was quiet again, and life in Utica continued its peaceful rhythm. But the episode left her shaken, reminded her of how fragile her sense of safety truly was. The next time Wyatt came to town, it was late September and the air had a definite chill. Wilhelmina was sorting through a shipment of fabric that had arrived from Helena when he entered the store. This time, she managed to look up and meet his eyes for just a moment before looking away. "Afternoon, Miss Foster," he said, and she realized with a start that he knew her name, though they had never been properly introduced. "Mrs. Green." "Afternoon, Wyatt," Martha replied. "Your order's ready. I added those extra nails you asked about in your last letter. Much obliged." While Martha went to gather his supplies, an awkward silence fell. Wilhelmina continued sorting fabric, her hands moving mechanically. She could feel Wyatt standing near the door, not moving, not speaking, just present. Finally, he spoke, his voice gentle. "Those are fine colors. The blue would look nice on you. Matches your eyes." Wilhelmina's hand stilled. It was the first time he had said anything beyond a greeting to her. She glanced up, surprised, and found him looking at the fabric, not at her. His expression was kind, open, with no trace of the cunning or cruelty she had learned to watch for in men. "Thank you," she whispered. the words barely audible. He nodded and said nothing more, and when Martha returned, he completed his business and left as he always did, quiet and unhurried. "He's sweet on you," Martha said after he'd gone. Wilhelmina's head snapped up in alarm. Martha raised her hands. "Peace, child. I'm just observing. Wyatt's not the kind of man to push or demand. He's patient as the day is long. But I've known him since he was a boy, and I can see the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. Like you're something precious and fragile that he doesn't want to break." "I can't," Wilhelmina said, panic rising in her chest. "I can't be what anyone wants. I'm broken, Mrs. Green. I'm not fit for marriage or courting or any of it." "Who says you're broken?" Martha asked gently. "Someone hurt you, that's true. Someone treated you badly and it left scars. But scars mean you survived, Wilhelmina. They mean you're stronger than whatever tried to destroy you. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, there might be someone worth taking a chance on. But that's your choice to make, no one else's." Wilhelmina didn't respond, but the words stayed with her, turning over in her mind as she lay in bed that night. The thought of being courted, of being touched, of being vulnerable to a man's whims and anger, filled her with cold terror. But there was something about Wyatt Lawson that didn't quite fit the pattern of fear her mind had learned. He kept his distance. He was gentle. He seemed to understand without being told. Still, understanding and safety were two different things, and Wilhelmina had learned the hard way that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. October brought the first snow to the mountains and a crispness to the air that made the town feel even more isolated. The stage came less frequently now, and people began preparing for the long Montana winter. Wilhelmina had saved enough from her work at the store to buy warmer clothing and to contribute more substantially to her room and board, though Martha insisted the small amount was more than sufficient. One afternoon, Wyatt arrived at the store looking troubled. His usual calm demeanor was strained, and there was a tightness around his eyes that spoke of worry. "Mrs. Green, I have a problem," he said without preamble. "I've got a pregnant cow stuck in a ravine on the north section of my property. I can't get her out alone, and I can't leave her there. She'll die and the calf with her. I know it's asking a lot, but is there any chance your husband could spare a few hours to help me? I'll pay well." Martha shook her head. "Robert threw his back out yesterday moving crates. He can barely walk, but let me think who else might be available." "Most of the men are either working their own spreads or already committed," Wyatt said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't desperate." Wilhelmina found herself speaking before she could think better of it. "How do you plan to get her out?" Both Wyatt and Martha turned to look at her in surprise. She almost retreated, almost took the words back, but forced herself to continue. "I mean, what's the plan? What kind of help do you need?" Wyatt studied her for a moment, his expression careful. "I need to rig a sling under her belly and use my horse to pull her up the slope. But I need someone to guide the sling while I manage the horse, and then someone to help me check her over once she's out. It's not heavy work, just needs 2 sets of hands." "I could help," Wilhelmina heard herself say, and immediately wanted to take it back. What was she thinking? Being alone with a man miles from town was the last thing she should volunteer for, but Wyatt's eyes widened slightly, and he shook his head. "That's kind of you, Miss Foster, but it's rough country and cold work. I couldn't ask that of you." "You're not asking. I'm offering." Wilhelmina's heart was hammering, but something in her was pushing forward, testing, trying. She had spent 6 weeks hiding, avoiding, running from shadows. Maybe it was time to see if she could do something different. And if she was going to try with anyone, Wyatt Lawson seemed like the safest choice. He had never given her reason to fear him. Martha looked between them, her expression thoughtful. "Are you sure, Wilhelmina?" "No," Wilhelmina admitted honestly. "But I can do this. I'm stronger than I look, and I've worked with animals before. My grandfather had a farm." Wyatt hesitated, clearly torn. "If you're certain, I'd be grateful for the help, but the moment you want to turn back, you say so. No questions asked." They set out in Wyatt's wagon 20 minutes later, Wilhelmina bundled in a warm coat Martha had insisted she borrow. The ride out of town was quiet, the wagon rattling over the rough road that led north into the foothills. Wilhelmina sat as far from Wyatt as the wagon seat allowed, her hands gripping the edge of the seat, her body tense. Wyatt kept his eyes on the road and his hands steady on the reins. After a while he spoke, his voice low and conversational. "This land belonged to my grandfather originally. He came out here in '58 before Montana was even a territory. Built the ranch from nothing. My father inherited it and then it came to me. It's not the biggest spread, but it's good land. The cattle do well here." He was talking to fill the silence, Wilhelmina realized, to make the journey less awkward. She appreciated the effort. "How many head do you run?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. "About 200 right now. I'm hoping to increase that over the next few years, but it's slow going alone. I've got 3 horses, a dozen chickens, and one very spoiled barn cat named Molly." Despite herself, Wilhelmina felt a small smile tug at her lips. "A barn cat named Molly. She belonged to my mother. When my parents died, I couldn't bring myself to change anything about the animals or the house. It felt like erasing them. So Molly still lives in the barn, still gets cream every evening, and still acts like she owns the place." "I'm sorry about your parents," Wilhelmina said softly. "Thank you. It was 4 years ago, but some days it feels like yesterday. They were good people. Would have liked you, I think." The comment surprised her. "Why do you say that?" Wyatt was quiet for a moment, guiding the horses around a rough patch in the road. "My mother valued strength. Not the kind that comes from muscle or stubbornness, but the kind that lets a person keep going even when everything in them wants to quit. You have that. I can see it." Wilhelmina didn't know how to respond to that, so she said nothing. But something in her chest loosened slightly, a knot of tension easing. The ranch came into view after about 40 minutes of travel. It was smaller than Wilhelmina had expected, but well-maintained, with a sturdy house, a large barn, and several outbuildings surrounded by fenced pastures. Cattle grazed in the distance, dark shapes against the golden grass. "It's nice," Wilhelmina said, and meant it. "It's home," Wyatt replied simply. They didn't stop at the house but continued north, following a track that led into rougher country. After another 20 minutes, Wyatt pulled the wagon to a stop and pointed toward a steep ravine cut into the hillside. "She's down there. Went looking for grass and slipped. Fool cow." They climbed down from the wagon, and Wilhelmina followed Wyatt to the edge of the ravine. Below, about 15 feet down a rocky slope, stood a large brown cow, her sides bulging with her unborn calf. She lowed pitifully when she saw them. "Oh, you poor thing," Wilhelmina murmured. Wyatt glanced at her, surprised again. "You really do like animals." "They're easier than people," Wilhelmina said without thinking, then flushed. But Wyatt just nodded. "Fair enough. All right, here's what we'll do. I'm going to climb down with the sling. Once I get it positioned under her, I'll signal you. Then you'll guide my horse, Duke, and he'll provide the pulling power to get her up the slope. I'll stay below to make sure the sling doesn't slip. Can you handle a horse?" "I think so." "Duke's gentle. Just walk him forward slowly when I signal and stop when I yell. He knows the work, so he'll do most of it himself." Wilhelmina nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. But as Wyatt gathered the sling and rope from the back of the wagon, she realized her fear had receded. She was nervous about the task, worried about doing it wrong, but she wasn't afraid of Wyatt. Not right now, not here. The next hour was hard work. Wyatt climbed down into the ravine, moving carefully on the loose rock, and worked to position the canvas sling under the cow's belly. The animal was frightened and uncooperative at first, but Wyatt spoke to her in a low, soothing voice, the same gentle tone he used with Wilhelmina. And eventually, the cow calmed enough for him to secure the sling. Once the rope was attached, Wyatt climbed back up and showed Wilhelmina how to hook it to the harness on Duke, a massive draft horse with kind eyes and a patient temperament. Then Wyatt descended again to guide the cow from below. "All right," he called up. "Nice and slow." Wilhelmina clicked her tongue and urged Duke forward. The big horse leaned into his harness and the rope went taut. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the cow began to move, scrambling with her hooves as the sling took her weight and Wyatt guided her from behind. "Keep going," Wyatt shouted. "You're doing great." Wilhelmina kept Duke moving, her heart pounding, praying the rope wouldn't snap or the sling wouldn't slip. The cow bellowed in protest, but Wyatt kept her steady, and inch by inch, she rose up the slope. Finally, the cow reached level ground and Wyatt called, "Stop!" Wilhelmina halted Duke immediately. The cow stood on shaking legs, the sling still supporting some of her weight. Wyatt scrambled up the slope and quickly released the sling, checking the cow over with practiced hands. "She's all right," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Scraped up but nothing broken. The calf's still moving. They're going to be fine." Wilhelmina felt a rush of accomplishment so intense it surprised her. They had done it. Together, they had saved this animal and her unborn baby. Wyatt looked up at her, and his smile was so warm and genuine that it took her breath away. "Thank you. I couldn't have done this without you." "You're welcome," she said, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt proud of herself. They led the cow back toward the barn slowly, letting her set the pace. By the time they arrived, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Wyatt got the cow settled in a stall with fresh hay and water, then turned to Wilhelmina. "It's getting dark. I should get you back to town, but I'd like to offer you supper first. Nothing fancy, just stew I made yesterday and some bread. You've earned a hot meal." Wilhelmina hesitated. The day had gone well, better than she could have imagined. But going into his house, being alone with him in close quarters, that was different than working outside. Wyatt saw her hesitation and nodded. "Or I can take you back now. Whatever makes you comfortable." That was the thing about Wyatt Lawson. Wilhelmina was learning. He always gave her the choice, always let her decide. There was no pressure, no expectation, just patience. "Supper sounds nice," she said quietly. The interior of Wyatt's house was clean and simple, with handmade furniture and curtains that had probably been sewn by his mother. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, and the kitchen area was organized and tidy. Wyatt immediately went to build up the fire while Wilhelmina stood uncertainly near the door. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, gesturing to the table. "I'll get the stew heated." She sat, watching as he moved around the kitchen with competent efficiency. He talked as he worked, telling her about the ranch, about the challenges of running it alone, about his plans for the future. It was easy conversation, requiring little response from her, and Wilhelmina found herself relaxing incrementally. The stew was good, thick and rich with beef and vegetables, and the bread was fresh. They ate in companionable silence for a while before Wyatt spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" "You can tell me it's none of my business if you want." Wilhelmina tensed but nodded. "What made you come to Montana? I know you were supposed to marry Harold Zimmerman, and I'm sorry that didn't work out. But what made you willing to travel this far to marry a stranger?" Wilhelmina set down her spoon, her appetite suddenly gone. She had known the question would come eventually. I needed to get away from Boston, from my stepfather. Wyatt's expression darkened slightly. Did he hurt you? She couldn't look at him. Yes. I'm sorry. His voice was rough with suppressed anger, but the anger wasn't directed at her. I'm sorry that happened to you, and I'm sorry you felt you had to run so far to be safe. It was run or die, Wilhelmina said flatly. Those were my options. Then I'm glad you ran. And I'm glad you ended up here, even if the circumstances were terrible. She did look at him then, searching his face for signs of pity or disgust, but found only honest compassion. Why? Because I think Utica is better with you in it, Wyatt said simply. And I think you deserve a place where you can heal and be safe. Tears stung Wilhelmina's eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. I don't know if I can heal. I don't know if I'll ever be normal again. Normal is overrated, Wyatt said, and healing isn't about going back to who you were before. It's about becoming someone new, someone stronger. You're already doing that. I can see it. They finished the meal in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now, weighted with unspoken understanding. When Wyatt drove her back to town in the darkness, Wilhelmina found she wasn't afraid of him anymore. Wary still, cautious, but not afraid. Thank you for your help today, Wyatt said when they reached the general store. If you ever need anything at all, you let me know. Thank you for letting me help, Wilhelmina replied. It felt good to be useful. You're more than useful, Miss Foster. You're remarkable. He drove away before she could respond, leaving her standing in the street, her heart doing strange things in her chest. November arrived with heavy snows and biting cold. The town of Utica settled into its winter rhythm, and Wilhelmina continued her work at the store, her confidence growing slowly but steadily. Wyatt came to town every 2 weeks as usual, and each time he and Wilhelmina exchanged a few more words, their conversations growing gradually longer and more comfortable. One day, he arrived with a package wrapped in brown paper. "This is for you," he said, handing it to Martha. "If Miss Foster wants it, that is." Martha opened the package to reveal several yards of the blue fabric Wyatt had commented on months earlier, along with matching thread and buttons. "Wyatt Lawson, this is too much," Martha protested. "It's a thank you for the help with the cow," Wyatt said. "She had a healthy bull calf 2 weeks ago. Wouldn't have happened without Miss Foster." Wilhelmina stared at the fabric, overwhelmed. "I can't accept this." "You can and you will," Martha said firmly. "The man is trying to show his appreciation. Let him." Wilhelmina looked at Wyatt, who was watching her with those patient blue eyes. "Thank you. It's very kind." "You're welcome. I hope you'll make yourself a dress. I meant what I said about the color." After he left, Martha held up the fabric with a knowing smile. "This is courting behavior, you realize." "I know," Wilhelmina said quietly. "I just don't know what to do about it." "Do you want him to stop?" Wilhelmina considered the question honestly. Did she want Wyatt to stop? Stop being kind, stop being patient, stop looking at her like she was something precious. The answer surprised her. "No," she admitted. "I don't want him to stop, but I don't know how to let him closer either. I'm terrified of being hurt again." "Then you let him continue as he has been," Martha said wisely. "Wyatt's not the kind of man to rush or push. He'll wait for you to come to him if that's what it takes, and if you decide you can't, he'll accept that too." "But I think you're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Wilhelmina Foster. And I think you deserve happiness if you're brave enough to reach for it." That night, Wilhelmina lay in bed thinking about Wyatt Lawson. She thought about his gentleness with the frightened cow, his patience with her, the way he kept his distance but made his interest known. He was nothing like her stepfather, nothing like the men she had learned to fear. He was kind and steady and safe, but was safe enough. Could she ever trust him completely? Could she ever let herself be vulnerable with him without the terror crushing her? She didn't have answers, but for the first time, she wanted to try to find them. December brought a fierce cold that kept most people close to home. Wyatt still came to town for supplies, but his visits were briefer, the weather making travel difficult. Each time he came, he asked Wilhelmina how she was doing, if she needed anything, if she was warm enough in her room above the store. His concern was genuine and undemanding, and each time, Wilhelmina felt the walls around her heart crack just a little more. On Christmas Eve, the town gathered at the church for a service and social. Wilhelmina almost didn't go, intimidated by the crowd, but Martha convinced her it would be good for her. The church was warm and decorated with pine boughs and candles, and the townspeople were in good spirits despite the harsh winter. Wilhelmina saw Wyatt across the room talking with some of the other ranchers. He looked up, caught her eye, and smiled. Not a presumptuous smile, not a possessive smile, just a simple expression of happiness at seeing her. She smiled back before she could stop herself. Later, when people were sharing food and conversation, Wyatt approached her, keeping a respectful distance as always. "Merry Christmas, Miss Foster. Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawson." "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small package from his coat pocket. "It's not much, but I thought you might like it." Wilhelmina opened the package to find a pair of leather gloves lined with soft rabbit fur. They were clearly handmade, the stitching careful and even. "I noticed your hands get cold when you're working," Wyatt said. "I thought these might help." "Did you make these?" Wilhelmina asked, running her fingers over the butter-soft leather. "I did. I'm better with leather than I am with words most of the time. They're beautiful, thank you." She wanted to give him something in return but had nothing prepared. "I'm sorry, I don't have anything for you. You gave me your trust, or at least the beginnings of it," Wyatt said quietly. "That's gift enough for me." The sincerity in his voice made Wilhelmina's throat tight. "You've been very patient with me. I'll be as patient as you need me to be." "There's no rush, Wilhelmina. I'm not going anywhere." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it on his lips made something warm bloom in her chest. "You can call me Mina," she heard herself say. "My mother used to call me that." Wyatt's smile could have lit up the whole church. "Mina, I like that, and you should call me Wyatt. We're friends, aren't we?" "Yes," Wilhelmina said and realized she meant it. "We're friends." The winter deepened, and January brought snowstorms that sometimes lasted for days. On one such day, when the store was empty and the wind howled outside, Wilhelmina sat with Martha by the stove, working on sewing the blue fabric into a dress. "You've come a long way since August," Martha observed, watching Wilhelmina's careful stitches. "I have help," Wilhelmina said. "You've been so kind to me. I'm not talking about my help, though I'm glad to give it. I'm talking about you. You smile now. You don't flinch every time the door opens. You're healing." "Wyatt helps with that," Wilhelmina admitted. "He makes me feel safe. He's a good man." "Are you thinking about a future with him?" Wilhelmina's hand stilled on the fabric. "I don't know if I can be what he needs. A rancher's wife has to be strong, capable, able to handle all sorts of situations. I'm still afraid of so much. You handled that cow rescue just fine. You work hard here every day. You survived things that would have broken a weaker person. You're more capable than you think, Mina." "But what about the other parts of marriage?" Wilhelmina's voice dropped to a whisper. "The intimate parts. I don't know if I could bear it." Martha was quiet for a moment. "That's something you'd have to work out with Wyatt if it comes to that. But I'll tell you this. A man who's willing to wait the way he's waiting, who's willing to be patient and kind the way he is, that's a man who'll put your comfort and happiness above his own desires. That's rare, Mina. That's precious." Wilhelmina nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She knew Martha was right, but knowing and doing were very different things. The dress was finished by the end of January, and Wilhelmina wore it to the store one morning when the sun was shining, and the temperature had risen above freezing for the first time in weeks. She felt self-conscious in the bright blue fabric, but Martha clapped her hands in delight. "Oh, you look lovely. That color is perfect for you." By some coincidence, or perhaps not, Wyatt arrived at the store that very morning. When he walked in and saw Wilhelmina in the blue dress, he stopped dead, his expression one of open admiration. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice rough. Wilhelmina felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you, for the fabric, I mean. It was a wonderful gift. Seeing you in it is gift enough for me." They stood there, looking at each other across the store, and something shifted between them. The air felt charged, full of possibility. Wilhelmina realized that she wanted him to come closer, wanted to close the distance between them, but old fears held her in place. Wyatt, as always, sensed her hesitation and didn't push. He simply smiled, collected his supplies, and left as he always did, patient and kind. But that night, lying in bed, Wilhelmina made a decision. She was tired of being afraid, tired of letting her stepfather's cruelty control her life, tired of running from something that might be good and real and healing. If she was ever going to move forward, she needed to take a risk. And Wyatt Lawson was worth the risk. February brought a warming trend and the first hints that spring might actually come again. One afternoon, when Wyatt came to town, Wilhelmina gathered her courage and approached him as he was loading supplies into his wagon. "Wyatt." He turned immediately, giving her his full attention. "Yes. Would it be all right if I came to visit the ranch sometime, to see how the cow and calf are doing?" Surprise and pleasure crossed his face. "I'd like that very much. Whenever you want to come, just say the word." "Next Sunday." "If the weather holds." Next Sunday would be perfect. That Sunday was clear and cold, with a blue sky that seemed to stretch forever. Wyatt picked up Wilhelmina in his wagon, and they made the familiar journey to the ranch. Wilhelmina felt nervous but not afraid, which was its own kind of miracle. The cow and her calf were in the barn, healthy and content. The calf was growing fast, all legs and curiosity, and he came right up to Wilhelmina to sniff her hand. "He's beautiful," she said, laughing when the calf licked her fingers. "Thanks to you he's here," Wyatt said. "I named him Lucky." Seemed appropriate. After checking on the cattle, Wyatt showed Wilhelmina around the ranch properly, introducing her to the horses, the chickens, and finally, Molly the barn cat, who regarded Wilhelmina with regal disdain before demanding attention. "She'll warm up to you eventually," Wyatt said, scratching Molly behind the ears. "She just likes to pretend she's above it all." They had lunch in the house, soup and sandwiches that Wyatt had prepared. Wilhelmina was more comfortable here than she had been the first time, able to appreciate the coziness of the home, the way Wyatt had maintained his parents' touches while making the space his own. "You ever get lonely out here?" she asked as they ate. "Sometimes," Wyatt admitted. "Especially in the winter, but I have the animals and I get to town regularly, and lately I've had something to look forward to." "What's that?" He met her eyes steadily. "Seeing you." Wilhelmina's heart skipped. "Wyatt, I need to tell you something about why I'm the way I am." "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to share." "I want to. I need you to understand." She took a deep breath. "My stepfather, after my mother died, he was violent. He hurt me many times. In many ways, I thought he would kill me eventually, so I ran. I answered Harold Zimmerman's advertisement, because it was the first opportunity I found to get far enough away that my stepfather couldn't follow. I didn't care who Harold was or what he was like. I just needed to escape." Wyatt's jaw was tight, his hands clenched on the table, but his voice remained gentle. I'm sorry you went through that. No one should have to endure such treatment. I'm damaged, Wilhelmina continued, the words tumbling out now. I'm afraid of men, afraid of being touched, afraid of so many things. I don't know if I'll ever be normal. I don't know if I can be a proper wife to anyone. Mina, look at me. Wyatt waited until she met his eyes. You're not damaged, you're hurt, and that's different. Hurt can heal. And you don't have to be anything other than who you are. If we're going to have any kind of future together, and I hope we are, it'll be based on who you really are, not who you think you should be. But what if I can't give you what you need? What I need is someone who's honest and kind and strong enough to keep trying even when it's hard. You're all of those things. Everything else we can figure out together at whatever pace you need. I'm not in this for what I can get from you, Mina. I'm in this because I care about you. Because I think you're remarkable. Because I want to be part of your life in whatever way you'll let me. Tears spilled down Wilhelmina's cheeks. Why are you so patient with me? Because you're worth the patience. Because rushing you would be cruel, and I'd rather wait a lifetime than hurt you. He reached slowly across the table, his hand palm up, offering. You don't have to take it, but the offer's there if you want it. Wilhelmina looked at his hand, calloused and strong but gentle. She thought about all the times he had kept his distance, all the times he had given her space and choice and respect. She thought about how safe she felt with him, how he had never once made her feel pressured or afraid. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out and placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers carefully, his touch warm and solid. He didn't pull her closer, didn't try to take more than she was offering, just held her hand and smiled at her with such tenderness that it made her chest ache. Thank you for trusting me, he said quietly. They sat like that for a long time, hands joined across the table, not speaking, just being together. It was the first time Wilhelmina had let a man touch her without fear since her mother died, and it felt like victory. When Wyatt drove her back to town that evening, Wilhelmina felt different. Lighter somehow, as if she had set down a burden she had been carrying for too long. Can I come visit again? She asked as they reached the store. Anytime you want. You're always welcome, Mina. Next week. Next week, he agreed, his smile bright in the gathering dusk. Over the following weeks, Wilhelmina visited the ranch every Sunday. Each visit, she grew more comfortable with Wyatt, more at ease in his presence. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. He told her about his childhood, his parents, his dreams for the ranch. She told him about her mother, her love of books, the happy memories from before her mother remarried. Little by little, Wilhelmina allowed more physical contact. A hand held, a brief touch on her arm. Once, when she was laughing at something Wyatt said, she impulsively squeezed his hand, and the look of joy on his face made her realize how much her trust meant to him. March arrived with muddy roads and the first green shoots pushing through the earth. One Sunday, as they walked through the pastures checking on the new calves, Wyatt stopped and turned to face her. Mina, I need to tell you something, and I want you to know there's no pressure attached to it. I just need to say it. Her heart started to race. All right. I'm in love with you. I think I've been since the day you offered to help with the cow, maybe even before that. I love your strength and your kindness and your courage. I love the way you're gentle with the animals and the way you laugh when you think no one's listening. I love everything about you. Wilhelmina stood frozen, her mind whirling. Love, he loved her. You don't have to say anything back, Wyatt continued quickly. I just wanted you to know I'll keep waiting as long as you need. Nothing has to change. But something had changed. Hearing him say those words, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, Wilhelmina realized that what she felt for Wyatt had grown far beyond simple trust or friendship. She cared for him deeply, looked forward to their time together with an eagerness that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with something warmer, something that felt dangerously close to love. "I care about you too," she said carefully. "More than I thought I could care about anyone. I'm not sure if what I feel is love yet. I don't know if I remember what love feels like, but I know I'm happiest when I'm with you. I know I think about you constantly. I know that the idea of a future without you in it feels empty and wrong." Wyatt's expression was soft. "That's more than enough for me. The rest will come or it won't, and either way, I'm here." "How can you be so patient?" Wilhelmina asked, wonder in her voice. "Because you're worth it. How many times do I have to tell you that before you believe it?" She smiled, reaching for his hand. "Maybe a few hundred more." April brought warmer weather and longer days. Wilhelmina continued to work at the store, but more and more of her time was spent at the ranch with Wyatt. She helped with the spring planting of the kitchen garden, learned to ride one of his gentler horses, and spent hours in the barn with the animals. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Wyatt said, "I've been thinking about hiring help for the ranch. If the herd keeps growing, I won't be able to manage it alone much longer." "That makes sense," Wilhelmina said. "Have you found anyone?" "There's a young man, Danny Cooper, who's been asking about work. He's 17, responsible, knows ranching. I think he'd be a good fit." "Then you should hire him." Wyatt was quiet for a moment. "I also have another reason for wanting to hire help. I'm hoping someday to have other responsibilities that will take time away from ranch work." "What kind of responsibilities?" He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "A family, a wife. I'm not asking you anything right now, Mina. I'm just telling you what I'm hoping for, what I'm working toward." Wilhelmina's breath caught. A wife. He was talking about her, about marriage, about a future together. The thought should have terrified her, but instead it filled her with a tentative, fragile hope. "I think about that too," she admitted quietly. "About what it would be like to live here, to wake up to this view every morning, to build a life with you." "What stops you?" "Fear. The same thing that's always stopped me. I'm afraid of making promises I can't keep. I'm afraid of disappointing you." Wyatt reached for her hand, and she gave it freely now. "You could never disappoint me, and you don't have to make any promises until you're ready. I told you I'll wait." "What if I'm never ready for everything a marriage requires?" The question that had haunted her for months finally came out. "What if I can't be a real wife to you?" "Define real wife," Wyatt said gently. "You know what I mean. The physical aspects, sharing a bed, all of it." He was quiet, choosing his words carefully. "I won't lie and say that physical intimacy isn't something I'd hope for in a marriage, but it's not the most important thing. Not by a long shot. If we married and you needed time before we reached that point, I'd wait. If you needed separate rooms, we'd have separate rooms. If you could never get to that point, we'd work something out. What matters to me is spending my life with you, Mina. The rest is details we can figure out together. You say that now, but what about in 5 years? 10? Won't you resent me?" "No, because I'll have you, and that's what I want most. I'm not some boy who can't control his urges, Mina. I'm a grown man who knows his own mind. I want you in my life. I want to take care of you and have you take care of me. I want to build something lasting with you. If that includes a physical relationship, wonderful. If it doesn't, or if it takes years to get there, that's fine too." Wilhelmina felt tears sting her eyes. "How are you real?" "I'm real because my mother raised me to respect women and my father raised me to keep my word. And because I love you too much to ever hurt you by pushing for something you're not ready to give." That night, lying in her bed above the store, Wilhelmina made a decision. She was ready. Not for everything, not yet, but ready for the next step. Ready to commit to Wyatt, to trust him with her future, to believe that he meant what he said. The next Sunday when Wyatt picked her up, she said, "I have something to tell you. He looked concerned. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine. Better than fine." She took a deep breath. "I love you, Wyatt. I'm in love with you. I think I have been for a while, but I was afraid to admit it. But I'm not afraid anymore, at least not of this." The wagon lurched as Wyatt pulled the horses to an abrupt stop. He turned to her, his eyes bright. "Say that again." "I love you." He reached for her, then stopped himself, his hand hovering. "Can I hold you, please?" "Yes." Wyatt gathered her into his arms carefully, as if she were made of glass. Wilhelmina stiffened for just a moment, old instincts flaring, but then she relaxed into his embrace. He was warm and solid and safe, and being held by him felt nothing like the violence she had known. This was gentle, protective, loving. "I love you too," he murmured into her hair. "So much, Mina, so very much." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other on the side of the road, until Wilhelmina pulled back slightly to look at him. "I want to marry you," she said. "If you'll still have me with all my fears and limitations. There's nothing I want more in this world, but are you sure?" "We can wait longer if you need to. I'm sure. I want to build a life with you. I want to try to be brave enough for this." "You're already brave enough. You're the bravest person I know." They were married in May in the small church in Utica, with Martha and her family as witnesses. Wilhelmina wore a dress she had sewn herself from white cotton, simple but elegant, and Wyatt wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his eyes never leaving her face. The ceremony was brief, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Wyatt leaned in slowly, giving Wilhelmina plenty of time to pull away. She didn't. Their first kiss was gentle and sweet, barely a brush of lips, but it felt like a promise. That night, at the ranch that was now her home, Wilhelmina was nervous. Wyatt had insisted on preparing a separate bedroom for her, just in case she needed space, but she found herself standing at the door of his room instead. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, removing his boots, when he noticed her. He stood immediately. "Mina, are you all right?" "I want to try," she said, her voice trembling. "To be a real wife to you, I want to try." Wyatt crossed the room but stopped a few feet away. "We don't have to do anything tonight or any night until you're ready." "I know, but I want to try. I trust you, Wyatt. If I can do this with anyone, it's with you. Then we'll go slowly, and the moment you want to stop, we stop. No questions, no arguments, I promise." What followed was the most patient, gentle introduction to physical intimacy that Wilhelmina could have imagined. Wyatt kept his promise, going slowly, checking in with her constantly, stopping whenever she tensed or showed signs of distress. It wasn't perfect. Wilhelmina had moments of panic, moments where the past threatened to overwhelm the present. But each time, Wyatt held her, reassured her, reminded her that she was safe. And gradually, slowly, the fear receded. By the time dawn light crept through the window, Wilhelmina was exhausted but triumphant. They had consummated their marriage, and while it hadn't been easy, it hadn't been the nightmare she had feared either. Wyatt had been careful and loving and patient, and she had made it through. "You did so well," Wyatt murmured, holding her close. "I'm so proud of you." "It gets easier, doesn't it?" she asked. "It will, I promise, and we'll go at your pace always." The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Wilhelmina had to learn to live with another person, to share space, to navigate the daily intimacies of married life. Some days were harder than others. Some nights, she needed to sleep in the other room, and Wyatt never complained, just kissed her forehead and told her he'd see her in the morning. But slowly, steadily, Wilhelmina healed. The nightmares came less frequently. The moments of panic grew shorter. She learned to trust in Wyatt's goodness, to believe that he meant what he said, that he would never hurt her the way she had been hurt before. She threw herself into ranch life, discovering that she loved the work, loved the animals, loved the sense of purpose and accomplishment it gave her. Wyatt hired Danny Cooper as planned, and the young man proved to be hardworking and respectful. With his help, they were able to expand the herd and make improvements to the property. A year into their marriage, Wilhelmina realized she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complex mixture of emotions. Joy, certainly, but also fear. Fear of childbirth, fear of motherhood, fear of bringing a child into a world that had shown her so much cruelty. But Wyatt was overjoyed and his happiness was infectious. He fussed over her constantly, insisted she rest more, helped with all the heavy chores. And when Wilhelmina confessed her fears, he held her and told her that their child would grow up surrounded by love, protected and cherished, never knowing the kind of pain she had endured. Their son was born in March of 1883, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and a powerful set of lungs. They named him William after Wyatt's father, and from the moment Wilhelmina held him, she felt a love so fierce and protective it took her breath away. Wyatt was a devoted father, getting up with the baby at night, changing diapers, walking the floor when William was fussy. He took to fatherhood as naturally as he did everything else, and watching him with their son made Wilhelmina fall even more deeply in love with him. As William grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. The herd increased to over 300 head, and they added more land to their holdings. Danny Cooper became more than an employee but a trusted friend, and eventually he married a girl from town and built a small house on the edge of the property. Wilhelmina found herself becoming involved in the community in ways she had never imagined. She helped at the church, befriended other ranch wives, and even convinced Wyatt to host occasional gatherings at their home. The terrified woman who had arrived in Utica nearly 3 years earlier was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who had learned that not all men were cruel, that love could be gentle, that safety was possible. When William was 2, Wilhelmina became pregnant again. This time, there was less fear and more excitement. Their daughter was born in the autumn, a tiny thing with blonde hair and her mother's gray eyes. They named her Margaret after Wilhelmina's mother, and she completed their family in a way Wilhelmina hadn't known was missing. One evening when William was 4 and Margaret was 2, Wyatt found Wilhelmina sitting on the porch, watching the children play in the yard under Danny's watchful eye. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "About how different my life is now. About how grateful I am." "I'm the grateful one," Wyatt said, reaching for her hand. "You took a chance on me. You trusted me when you had every reason not to trust any man. You gave me a family and a life better than I ever dreamed of." "We gave each other those things," Wilhelmina corrected. "You saved me, Wyatt. You were patient when I needed patience, gentle when I needed gentleness, and you never gave up on me even when I had almost given up on myself. You never gave up. That's not in your nature. You just needed time to remember how strong you are." William ran up to the porch then, demanding his father's attention for some childhood emergency. Wyatt scooped him up with a laugh, and Margaret followed, not wanting to be left out. Soon all 4 of them were tangled together, laughing and tickling and just being a family. As the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Wilhelmina felt a contentment so complete it almost frightened her. She had traveled so far, endured so much, and somehow ended up here in this place, with this man and these children. The mail-order bride who had arrived terrified and broken had become a ranch wife, a mother, a woman who knew her own strength. And the gentle cowboy who had waited patiently for her to come to him had gained a wife who loved him with her whole heart. The years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of ranch life. William grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with the cattle. Margaret was bright and fearless, always climbing trees or chasing after the barn cats. Wyatt's hair started to show threads of silver at the temples, and Wilhelmina found she didn't mind the passage of time. Each year brought new memories, new joys, new reasons to be grateful for the life they had built together. When William was 10 and Margaret was 8, Wilhelmina surprised everyone, including herself, by becoming pregnant again. She was 32 now, older than she had been with the other two, and the pregnancy was harder. But Wyatt was there every step of the way, supporting her, caring for her, making sure she rested and ate well. Their second son was born just after the new year in 1891. They named him Thomas, and he was a happy, easy baby who rarely cried and smiled at everyone. William and Margaret doted on their little brother, fighting over who got to hold him or help feed him. The ranch had grown into one of the most successful operations in the territory. Montana had achieved statehood in 1889, and Utica had grown along with it. The town now had a proper school, a doctor, and several new businesses. Wilhelmina had made real friendships among the women of the community, and she and Martha Green remained close, meeting for tea at least once a month to catch up and share news. One afternoon, when Thomas was about 6 months old, Wilhelmina was in the kitchen preparing supper when she heard a commotion outside. She went to the door to find a strange man on horseback talking to Wyatt. Something about the man's bearing, the way he sat his horse, sent a chill through her. Wyatt must have sensed her distress because he glanced toward the house and said something to the man. The stranger tipped his hat and rode off, and Wyatt came quickly to the porch. "Who was that?" Wilhelmina asked, hating the tremor in her voice. "Just a drifter asking about work." "I told him we have all the help we need." Wyatt studied her face. "Are you all right? You've gone pale." He reminded me of someone from before. She didn't have to explain further. Wyatt knew what she meant by before. He pulled her into his arms. "He's gone now, and even if he wasn't, I'm here." "You're safe, Mina. You're always safe with me." The moment passed, as such moments always did, but it reminded Wilhelmina that healing wasn't a straight line. There would always be triggers, always be moments when the past reached out to touch her. But those moments were fewer and farther between now, and she had Wyatt to anchor her when they came. That evening, after the children were asleep, Wilhelmina and Wyatt sat together on the porch as they often did, enjoying the cool night air and the peaceful sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. "Do you ever regret it?" Wilhelmina asked suddenly. "Regret what? Marrying someone like me?" "Someone damaged. Someone who still has moments of fear after all these years." Wyatt turned to her, his expression fierce. "Never, not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Wilhelmina Lawson. Your past doesn't define you, and those moments of fear don't diminish who you are. You're strong and brave and loving, and I'm honored that you chose to build a life with me." "I love you," she said, for what must have been the 1,000th time, but it never got old saying it. "I love you too. Always will." As the years rolled on, the Lawson Ranch became a fixture in the community. William eventually took on more responsibility, learning the business from his father with the intention of taking over one day. Margaret proved to have a gift with horses and spent hours training the ranch's stock. Thomas grew into a cheerful, energetic boy who brought laughter and light to everyone around him. Wilhelmina found her own passions beyond ranch work. She started a small lending library in Utica, collecting books and making them available to anyone who wanted to read. She taught Sunday school at the church and mentored young women who were new to the territory, offering them the same kind of patient support that Martha had once given her. One day when she was helping at the library, a young woman came in, clearly nervous, her clothes worn and her eyes wary. Wilhelmina recognized that look, had worn it herself once upon a time. "Can I help you?" she asked gently. "I'm new to town," the woman said quietly. "I was told this was a place to find books." "It is. I'm Wilhelmina Lawson. Please look around. Take whatever interests you." The woman, who introduced herself as Sarah, began to visit the library regularly. Gradually, through careful conversation, Wilhelmina learned that Sarah was fleeing an abusive situation, much as Wilhelmina had once fled. Without making a big production of it, Wilhelmina made sure Sarah had what she needed, helped her find work, introduced her to people who could be trusted. Watching Sarah slowly heal, slowly find her strength, reminded Wilhelmina of her own journey. It felt good to be able to help, to use her experience to make someone else's path a little easier. When Wilhelmina mentioned Sarah to Wyatt one evening, he smiled. "You're doing what Martha did for you. Passing on the kindness." "I suppose I am. It feels right." "It is right. You have a gift for seeing people who are hurting and knowing how to help them. I'm proud of you, Mina." As their children grew into young adults, Wilhelmina and Wyatt found their relationship deepening in new ways. The physical intimacy that had once been so frightening had become a source of comfort and connection. They had learned each other's rhythms, needs, and desires, and what they shared was built on a foundation of trust and genuine love. There were still occasional difficult nights, times when Wilhelmina's past surfaced in nightmares or moments of unexpected panic. But Wyatt had learned how to help her through them, how to ground her in the present, how to remind her that she was safe. And there were beautiful moments, too. Nights when they sat together under the stars, talking about their dreams for the future. Mornings when they woke wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for another day together. Quiet afternoons when they worked side by side, comfortable in the companionship that came from years of shared life. William turned 18 in 1891, and to celebrate, the family threw a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from all over the territory, and the house was full of laughter and music and joy. Watching her eldest son, now a man, laughing with his friends and helping his father manage the celebration, Wilhelmina felt a swell of pride and love so intense it brought tears to her eyes. Wyatt found her standing apart from the crowd, wiping her eyes. "Happy tears, I hope?" he asked. "Very happy. I was just thinking about how far we've come, how much we've built together." "We've been blessed," Wyatt agreed, "more than I ever thought possible. Do you remember the day I offered to help you with that cow? That feels like a lifetime ago." "It was a lifetime ago." "We were different people then." He took her hand. "Though I loved you even then, I think. You were so scared but so determined to be brave. I admired that." "I was terrified of you," Wilhelmina admitted. "Of all men. I never thought I'd be able to stand here like this, surrounded by family and friends, married to a man I trust completely. You gave me that, Wyatt. You gave me my life back. We gave it to each other. You taught me patience and the value of real, deep commitment. You made me a better man." They stood together, hands joined, watching their children and friends celebrate. Margaret was dancing with Danny Cooper's eldest son, her face flushed with happiness. Thomas was trying to sneak extra pieces of cake when he thought no one was looking. William was deep in conversation with some of the other young ranchers, already thinking about the future. As the party wound down and guests began to depart, the family worked together to clean up. It was a well-practiced routine by now, everyone knowing their role, working in harmony. By the time the last dish was washed and put away, the moon was high in the sky. Wilhelmina tucked Thomas into bed, listening to his prayers, kissing his forehead. Margaret was already asleep, exhausted from dancing. William was on the porch, keeping watch as he often did, taking his responsibilities seriously even on festive nights. Finally, Wilhelmina made her way to the bedroom she shared with Wyatt. He was already there, removing his boots, looking tired but content. "That was a good party," he said. "It was perfect." Wilhelmina sat beside him on the bed. "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "About how grateful I am that Harold Zimmerman died before I could marry him." Wyatt looked startled. "That's a strange thing to be grateful for." "Is it?" "If he had lived, I would have married him out of desperation. I would have been trapped in another loveless, potentially dangerous situation. His death freed me to find you, to build this life. Everything good that I have came from that terrible stroke of luck." "I never thought of it that way, but you're right. I'm sorry Harold died, but I'm grateful that you ended up with me instead." "So am I. Every single day I'm grateful." They lay down together, fitting themselves into the familiar contours of shared sleep. Wyatt's arm came around Wilhelmina, and she nestled against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "I love you, Mina," he murmured into her hair. "I love you too, Wyatt, always." The years continued their steady march. William eventually married a girl from Helena, a rancher's daughter named Catherine, who was smart and capable and fit into the family seamlessly. They built a house on the far side of the property and began their own family, giving Wilhelmina and Wyatt their first grandchild, a boy named John, in 1894. Margaret married later, taking her time to find the right person. When she finally did fall in love, it was with a teacher who had moved to Utica from back east. They married when Margaret was 23, and her husband, David, proved to be a gentle, thoughtful man who supported Margaret's passion for horses and never tried to change her. Thomas was still young, only 13 when his siblings married, but he showed signs of wanting to follow in William's footsteps and learn the ranching business from the ground up. Wilhelmina was 45 when she realized that her life had become everything she had never dared to dream of. She had a husband who loved her unconditionally, children who were healthy and happy, grandchildren on the way, a home she cherished, and a community where she was valued and respected. The terrified woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Utica 15 years earlier seemed like a distant memory, someone from another life. That woman's pain and fear had shaped Wilhelmina, had made her who she was, but no longer defined her. One evening, as she and Wyatt sat on their porch, now weathered by years of use, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold, Wilhelmina spoke. "I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For waiting, for being patient, for never pushing me to be anything other than what I was ready to be. You saved my life, Wyatt. Not in some dramatic storybook way, but in all the small, daily ways that actually matter. You gave me time and space and understanding, and that let me heal. I don't know if I ever really told you how much that meant." Wyatt reached for her hand, his touch as gentle as it had been 15 years earlier. "You didn't need to tell me. I could see it in the way you slowly came back to life. That was all the thanks I needed. Still, I want you to know. You are the best man I have ever known, and loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. Right back at you, Mrs. Lawson. Right back at you." They sat in companionable silence as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the sounds of Thomas moving around, probably looking for something to eat. The cattle lowed softly in the distance, settling for the night. A cool breeze brought the scent of pine and sage. "You ever think about where we'll be in another 15 years?" Wilhelmina asked. "All the time. I imagine us sitting right here, probably with a few more gray hairs and a lot more grandchildren, still watching the sunset and counting our blessings." "That sounds perfect, doesn't it though?" As if to prove the point, William's wagon appeared on the road, bringing Catherine and baby John for a visit. The child was now a toddler, full of energy and mischief, and he ran toward the house as soon as his father lifted him down from the wagon. "Grandma! Grandpa!" he called, his face lit with joy. Wilhelmina scooped him up, laughing as he wrapped his small arms around her neck. This child, this pure, innocent life, represented everything she and Wyatt had built together. John would grow up knowing only love and safety, never experiencing the kind of trauma that had once defined Wilhelmina's existence. That knowledge filled her with a deep, abiding peace. The evening passed in the warm chaos of family. Catherine helped Wilhelmina prepare supper while William and Wyatt discussed ranch business. Thomas entertained his nephew with games and stories. They ate together around the big kitchen table, talking and laughing, and Wilhelmina felt her heart was so full it might burst. After William's family left and Thomas went to bed, Wilhelmina and Wyatt prepared for sleep. It was a routine they had perfected over the years, moving around each other with easy familiarity. As they settled into bed, Wyatt pulled Wilhelmina close. "Happy?" he asked. "Impossibly so," she replied. "Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and discover this was all a dream. It's real. We're real. This life we've built is real and solid and ours. I know. I just can't quite believe how lucky I am sometimes." Luck had nothing to do with it. You were brave enough to reach for happiness when it was offered. You were strong enough to heal. You were wise enough to trust when trust was warranted. That wasn't luck, Mina. That was you. She kissed him then, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over the years. "You always know exactly what to say." "One of my many talents," he teased. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, as they had done thousands of times before, and would do thousands of times again. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the broken pieces of one woman's past and one man's patient love. The story of the mail-order bride who was terrified of men and the gentle cowboy who waited until she came to him didn't end with a single dramatic moment. It unfolded over years in countless small choices, in patience and trust slowly built, in healing that happened one day at a time. It was a story of survival and redemption, of learning to trust again, of discovering that love could be gentle and safe and real. It was a story that would be passed down to their children and grandchildren, a reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones where patience and kindness triumph over fear and pain. And as the Montana stars wheeled overhead and the ranch settled into peaceful sleep, Wilhelmina Lawson knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the person she was meant to be with, living the life she was always supposed to have. She had come to Montana territory broken and afraid, fleeing from horrors she couldn't speak of, expecting nothing but a chance at survival. Instead, she had found love, family, purpose, and healing. She had found home. And it all began because one gentle cowboy had the patience to wait until she was ready to come to him, and the wisdom to let her healing happen in her own time, at her own pace. That patience, that kindness, that unwavering support had made all the difference. In the quiet darkness of their bedroom, surrounded by the life they had built together, Wilhelmina whispered, "Thank you." Wyatt, already half asleep, murmured, "For what?" "For everything, for being you, for loving me." His arm tightened around her. "Always, Mina, always." And that was all that needed to be said. Their story, which had begun with fear and uncertainty, had transformed into one of love and trust and unshakable commitment. They had weathered storms, overcome obstacles, raised a family, and built a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. The mail-order bride who had arrived in Utica, Montana territory in the summer of 1881, terrified and alone, had become a woman of strength, confidence, and deep, abiding love. And the cowboy who had seen her worth from the very beginning and had the patience to wait for her, had gained a partner who cherished him as much as he cherished her. It was a love story for the ages, played out not on grand stages but in the quiet moments of daily life, in small kindnesses and patient understanding, in the gradual building of trust and the slow healing of old wounds. And as Wilhelmina drifted off to sleep, held safe in her husband's arms, she knew that every hardship she had endured, every moment of fear and pain, had been worth it to arrive at this moment, this life, this love. She had found her happily ever after, not in spite of her past, but because she had been brave enough to reach for it when it was offered and lucky enough to find a man patient enough to wait until she was ready. And that, in the end, was the greatest gift of all.